Kerbal Space Program. The game where anyone can try and build a rocket, but they don't always fly. Sometimes you build them, they explode, and you have to try again. But what if we actually went somewhere? Hi, I'm Nebula, and today I'll be kicking off my most ambitious series yet, with the main planet packs being Kerbal Star Systems II and Promised Worlds, which add many destinations to explore. And when paired with many part mods, it creates the ultimate KSP experience. Unfortunately, I don't have warp drives, nuclear propulsion, or any science to unlock any of those technologies. So it's about time I get to work. Welcome to KSP Galactic Quest. The start of this save is very similar to the starts of any other science playthrough, with a small crew pod on top of a solid rocket motor, accompanied with a bunch of mystery goos. I'm not a big fan of how you start out in the stock game because you always end up making the same rocket. You could try something by adding a bunch of solid rocket motors and thermostaging them by blowing up the previous one. But that is a little bit too complicated, and you can't really do a surface sample with a really tall rocket. This mission is over pretty quickly because it's just a small hop. I also adjusted the TWR by changing the thrust limiter. I thought I could try and make a little bit more bang for a buck and extend the life of the solid rocket motor. Now in the texture you can actually buy some parts and make some pretty unique rockets instead of making the same one over and over again. This is going to be our very first suborbital mission, and I'm actually going to launch this backwards because I'm hoping to land in a different biome. I'm using the Valiant engine from Restock Plus for my first stage, and for the second one, I'm using the Pug engine, which is also from Restock Plus. Restock Plus is basically like Restock, except it adds a bunch of parts that are kind of stock-alike. It just tries to fill a bunch of niches that are not filled by the stock parts. You may be wondering why all the parts of my spacecraft are shiny. That's because I'm using the mod Reforged Materials, which allows you to customize the appearance of your spacecraft by swapping out the bland stock shaders with a bunch of other ones that vary in shininess. It's also compatible with simple repaint, and it actually allows you to add your own color presets. Normally, if you want to do that with a normal simple repaint, you actually have to go into the config settings, and the amount of swatches you can add were very limited. With Reforged Materials, you can practically add unlimited colors. Back at Research and Development, you can unlock a bunch of more tech nodes and gain a lot more parts to use. For this next launch, I'm actually going to be launching from the runway, so I can collect all the extra experiments that are available on this very site. Unfortunately, moving this rocket to the runway changed its orientation, so when I pressed D to go in an equatorial orbit, it actually put me in an entirely different direction, and I had to kind of alter my course to correct it. Unfortunately, it was too late, the damage has already been done, and I ended up on a very wonky trajectory. I was hoping to achieve orbit, but after that backflip, it just seemed that it was completely impossible from here. Another thing you may notice about this save is that there are a whole lot more stars in the sky. Thanks to Distant Object Enhancement, I can actually hover over them and see what they are. Some stars, like the Alpha Kerbani system and Sirion systems from Kerbal Star Systems II, are some of the most visible stars in the sky. Realistically, stars aren't going to be visible in the daytime sky, but this is a Kerbal Space Program where all the stars are just a lot closer together. So much closer that instead of using the term light years, we actually use Kerbal light years, which I believe are a tenth of the distance of a light year, because everything in Kerbal Space Program is a 10th real scale. Here I am just looking around, looking at all the little dots in the sky. I'm not one to play the stock system too much, but it's a lot more attractive thanks to the Space Potatoes Visual Enhancements mod, which basically takes all the graphics you get from volumetric clouds and cranks it up to 11. You got stuff like volumetric aurora, cirrus clouds, and a bunch of other cool details. You also have bird noises outside of the Kerbal Space Center. That mission was scuffed and didn't get me too much science, so I didn't unlock too many technologies. This next rocket is going to be a little bit heavier, and it'll definitely reach orbit. Solid rocket motors on their own are actually enough to propel the core stage without any additional propulsion. So we jettison the solid rocket motors with a full tank in the core stage. I feel like a really neglected part of making KSP look better is with parts, because restock does make them look better, but it doesn't actually make them shiny or reflective. That's why I love reforged materials a lot. Now, Kerbal Space Program looks a lot better than Kerbal Space Program 2, surprisingly. I mean, there's some things that Kerbal Space Program 2 does slightly better, but Kerbal Space Program is just better nowadays in every way, especially how moddable it is. Sure, we got people making Kerbal Space Program 2 Redux, which is supposed to be KSP2, but is actually all those cracked up to be. I hope that actually succeeds. I might actually play it later. But in its current state, I'm not really interested in playing Kerbal Space Program 2 with a few extra parts. I'm really hoping they add colonies soon, but I've heard it's been pretty difficult to get it to work, especially with all the ISRU stuff. I'm hoping that project succeeds. Speaking of making Kerbal Space Program 2 actually work, Kitten Space Agency I heard it's also been doing pretty well. I'm hoping to play that game later down the line when it actually becomes more of a game instead of just a glorified tech demo. However, every update makes it a lot more interesting, so I might start playing it pretty soon. I actually have a whole lot of extra Delta V in this entire mission, so instead of just staying in Kerbin orbit and then returning home, I'm actually going to do a month flyby. Because I really want to get as much science as I possibly can so I can get out of the Kerbal system as quickly as possible. Now, I do have wormholes in this save, so I can actually skip a whole lot of the tech tree and just go straight Interstellar. Because everyone's already seeing the stock system. I mean, with Space Potato's visual upgrades, it looks a lot better. But I really want to focus more on the interstellar destinations in this series, because everyone's already seen the stock system. Everyone already knows what it looks like. We almost ended up crashing into the Mun, but I just did a little course correction to make sure we didn't crash. The good thing about Mun gravity assists is sometimes you can actually have a free return trajectory where the Mun's orbit just slings you straight back into Kerbin's atmosphere. At this point, this is where I realized I started having a very bad lag issue, because for some reason, whenever I time warped, the game would just start stuttering. Like every couple seconds, it would just lag for a second, then continue. If I started warping faster, the lag would get worse. I actually figured this out. With Blueshift and KSS2 installed, every 5 in-game minutes, in-game by the way, so it goes a lot faster when using time warp, it tries to spawn a Easter egg of some sort in orbit somewhere. And it did this every 5 minutes, by the way. Thankfully, I was able to fix this by going to the Blueshift's configuration settings and changing one of the variables that controlled how often Easter eggs can spawn, and I just added a few extra zeros to that. So instead of spawning every 5 in-game minutes, it probably spawns like more like every 5 in-game months or days or something. It's an extremely annoying issue in playing with both KSS2 and Blueshift. Another side effect of this bug is that now my save file has around 400 unknown objects. Yippee! Thankfully, a whole lot of these objects don't actually cause my game to load any slower, so I just gotta leave it on time warp for a while and get rid of all the question marks. This issue will remain in this series for just a little bit longer, because I didn't actually figure it out until after this episode, I believe. If you looked up about this issue, most people will say just to uninstall Blueshift, but I figured out a way. Just modify the settings. It's that easy. Just go to your game data, Wild Blue Industries, Blueshift, settings.config, whatever it is. Just go to the part where it says how many times it tries to spawn an anomaly, and change it from 300 to like 300,000. Here we are, our very first Lunar flyby completed. Now, many other KSP Let's Play episodes may end around this mark. However, we do things a little bit differently here. Many of you notice there's still a lot of time in this video, and if you're watching this far, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment about how you think my series is going. But we have a whole lot of missions to do. Besides, I do want to kind of speed around the stock system and just head straight interstellar, especially with the wormholes. There are actually 2 of them around Dres alone. I think it's about time we landed on the Mun. So this is going to be Eve 1, our very first moon landing. It's rather a hefty rocket, but they get a lot bigger later down the line. It's got room for 2 Kerbals, and it's overall a really great rocket. I feel like moon landings to the Mun and Mignus are a lot easier and quicker than interplanetary missions, because with interplanetary you have to worry about doing lots of time warp and transfer windows. But just around Kerbin orbit, if you want to go to the Mun or Mignus, it's just a whole lot easier. You don't have to worry about any of that. Previously in this video I was talking about Easter eggs and how blue shifts in KSS2 spawn them. I actually discovered one orbiting the Mun. It appears to be a weird relay created by some Unga Bunga people. I wonder who those are. This mission isn't really designed to do rendezvous around the Mun, so for now I'm going to ignore it and continue on with the landing. Eventually I will be exploring some of those anomalies. In fact, I'll be exploring one later this episode, so stay tuned. The transmunger injection goes along flawlessly, nothing goes wrong. In fact, to be honest, Kerbal Space Program, nothing really goes wrong. The only bad things that happen are caused by a lack of planning or just a skill issue. There's no part failures or anything, but there are mods that actually add those. Maybe I'll add those in a future series. At this point we can easily enter lunar orbit and then continue to the surface. Decided to do my retrograde burn on the night side of the Mun, just so I can land on the daytime side. I really hate landing on the dark just because I can't see anything and it's not really good for recording stuff either. I do use the last bit of the fuel in the transfer stage, but then I just ditch it. I don't really need it anymore and I can't land with it. I probably can try to, but there's no landing legs. And then we come to land on a nice little rock. I forgot to disable parallax scatter collisions. Maybe I'll leave them on for the time being. I'll probably disable them later, especially when I start using space planes, because if you're landing a space plane and you have your landing gear hit a tiny little pebble, it'll all explode, so I'll probably disable that later. This is our first landing of the series, but certainly not the last. I also decided to make a flag for this series, a brand new one too. I'm really good at making stuff in GIMP. It's a great photo editor that's completely free. It also works on a bunch of different platforms. I believe it definitely works on Windows. It's made for Linux. I'm not sure, but I think it also works on Mac, so you should be able to use it regardless of what operating system you use. Now, a lot of beginners don't know this, but instead of exiting lunar orbit and then bringing retrograde to return home, you can create a maneuver node in a specific area to just burn once and end up going home into Kerbin's atmosphere. This is because you may be burning prograde in lunar orbit, however, you're actually burning retrograde in a Kerbin orbit. This means you end up exiting the Mun's sphere of influence, but actually end up slowing down relative to Kerbin and end up dipping in its atmosphere, allowing you to return home. It was at this point I was trying to figure out what the stuttering issue was in my console. Even though the footage is sped up by 3 times, it's still pretty bad and noticeable here. I'll fix this issue later, don't worry. I thought it was an error relating to KSS2 textures at first because that was what was in the console. But it turns out to be Blue Shift spawning too many Easter eggs. Because KSS2 actually adds a few Blue Shift Easter eggs of its own. Seems that our space agency is finding a whole lot of success wherever it goes, and we'll keep finding more success because the next few missions go completely as planned. We do end up landing on the nighttime side of Kerbin, so we don't really get to see the ocean that well. We do come down for a nice splashdown. That moon mission gave us a lot of science to work with, so we unlocked some more technos, just solar panels, a few more engines to work with. Unfortunately, I'm really close to unlocking one more techno, but I'm only 6 science short, so what do? I just make a little doohickey, put it on the runway, and collect the missing science. It's got the best spacecraft in the world, but it certainly gets the job done. And using that, I buy advanced fuel systems. Absolutely beautiful mooring to launch a rocket. This one is actually very similar to the Eve one, except it has a larger core stage and it's powered by a Hydrolox engine. That's why it has a lot of tanks. With Hydrolox rockets, you need a lot of tankage to unlock their full potential. There is a thunderstorm very close. In real life, this mission probably would have been scrubbed, but it's Kerbal Space Program, weather doesn't matter. I don't really use Hydrolox engines as a first stage option that much because other fuels like kerosene or liquid fuel in the stock game and methalox are just better. Because hydrogen, although being very efficient, the density is terrible, so you need a very big first stage or fuel tanks in general to be able to use it well. And I have no idea what's causing this weird glitch, like sometimes when I enter the map, it just flashes all the orbit lines and lags my game out, it looks really nasty. I have no idea what causes this. If you have an idea of a potential fix, please leave a comment down below. This upper stage is pretty small, it's quite compact, but it gets the job done. I also noticed there are a whole lot of Easter eggs. There's like 5 of them in orbit around Mingmus. I'll definitely be exploring one of those. Normally, Mingmus is rather difficult to get in orbit around because it has a rather inclined orbit, so you need to do an inclination change if you want to get there normally. Thankfully, it must have been my lucky day because I just had to burn prograde to get an encounter with it. It wasn't the best encounter, but hey, that's what mid-course corrections are for. They have noticed that I'm not using anything like persistent thrust or background thrust. I probably will add background thrust in the future. Not persistent thrust because that's super buggy. I've heard a whole lot of people raving about the new background thrust mod. So I'll probably try that mod out. For the time being, I don't really need to use thrust during time warp, so I'll not add any of those mods right now, but I will add them in the future when I need to do long burns. Most KSP Let's Plays don't show Mingmus landings on Episode 1. At least to my knowledge. It just goes to show how easy stock Kerbal Space Program is. I often play with the rescale just because it actually makes the game a bit more challenging. But it's not really compatible with a whole lot of other planet packs, so I want to avoid as much jank and brokenness as possible. Now, this transfer stage actually has a lot of leftover fuel, so I'm going to use it to rendezvous with this strange space anomaly. Upon approaching the strange anomaly, I actually had to turn on Ignore Max Temperature, because for some reason when I first entered its physics range, it exploded because it had like 20,000 Kelvin skin temperature or something for some reason. Now, let's see what this alien megastructure is all about. On final approach, and it's gone. Marvelous. Not sure exactly what caused this. Maybe it has some threat avoidance system and tried to fly away from my craft. Or maybe it's super light and the thrust from my transfer stage just blew it away and out of a Mingmus orbit. Who knows? I guess this will give a lot of food for thought for the scientists back at the Research and Development building back on Kerbin. Speaking of research, it's time to collect all the science from Mingmus. This mission is somewhat overbuilt. I'm actually going to do a whole lot of biome hops. The stock game is pretty easy in terms of science mode because Mingmus, you can just do a bunch of biome hops and collect a ton of science. But this is a modded tech tree. It's a community tech tree, there are a lot of extra tech nodes. So I'm going to get a whole lot of science to complete everything and unlock warp drives. Here's our first landing on Mingmus in the Gregor Flats. You may have noticed a mild haze actually covering Mingmus, courtesy of Space Potato's visual enhancements. Mingmus is still lacking in atmosphere, but it does have a minor haze, maybe spawned by cryovolcanic activity. But then again, there may not be any cryovolcanoes because we don't really see any. We're only going to plant one flag for this landing because I don't want to have to plant a flag for every time I land because we're going to be visiting a whole lot of biomes. We're going to be visiting the lowlands, the midlands, the highlands, the slopes. A lot of different biomes and a lot of science. The great thing about Kerbal Engineer Redux is that you can actually tell which biome you're actually landing in. It's really useful for doing biome hops like this. It also gives this massive red marker to tell you where you're going to land. Every biome we're going to visit, we're just going to do a tiny little touch and go, collect science, and then move on to the next biome. For once, we're actually going to try and explore the moon instead of just landing once and then going home. Sometimes the biomes are kind of hard to land in because they're pretty small. The slopes are a notable example. I had to do a rather weird maneuver just to land in them. Landing 3. There are a lot of biomes. Maybe I should avoid landing in a bunch of different biomes. Then again, this is early game KSP, so I should probably avoid landing in multiple biomes in the future just so I don't unlock the entire tech tree in a few missions. Next biome we're going to landing is the Midlands. It's quite similar to the slopes, except the ground is a slightly different texture, a little bit more rugged. There's quite a few more pebbles on the ground too. Fortunately, I can't pick any of them up and bring them home, like you can with a Making History. Or actually, I think it's a Breaking Ground structures that spawn, because Breaking Ground DLC actually has a few space rocks you can pick up and bring home. But they're kind of rare, and they tend to blend in with the parallax rocks, so you can't really find them a lot of the time. This will be our last biome before we return home. This is the Highlands biome. Quite similar to the Lowlands, except there aren't as many rocks around. Never mind, there actually are quite a few rocks, just they didn't render because I was too far away. We collect our final little bit of science, then we're going to return. There are a couple biomes I missed, like I believe the Lesser Flats, but we are gaining enough science from this mission as it is, so might as well not kick a dead horse. That relay is still on the escape trajectory of Mignis and might end up on the escape trajectory of Kerbin, or maybe it will remain in a high orbit. The scientists are unsure of who created this relay, but they're calling the race that created all these space anomalies the Unga Bunga. Little is known about them. Maybe we'll have to perform some research by looking at these relays and other space anomalies. Looks like the scientists back at home have a whole lot of theorizing and research to do about this alien race that has probably colonized this galaxy and lived here for a long time. I'm not even sure if the Unga Bunga are still in this galaxy, because if they were, there'd probably be a lot more UFOs whizzing around Kerbin. Maybe they're all gone, maybe they're just very quiet, who knows, only time will tell. The return is rather hasty. We do come in a nice, quick return trajectory to Kerbin. Like every return mission, we just dip into the atmosphere and let atmospheric drag do the rest. We don't do a splashdown, we land in the grasslands again. We've already done an EVA and surface sample here, so there's not really much science to collect here. Besides, any science collected from Kerbin is just a drop in the bucket at this point. Something I like to do while descending is play with all the little doodads added by Raster Prop Monitor. It's a great mod that allows you to play the entire game within the IVA. Now that entire mission gave us almost 3,000 science, so we immediately go into this research and development and research a ton of technologies. Picking up better launch vehicles, more construction, more parts, more command pods, a bunch of other stuff. Usually I would wait until I have nuclear propulsion to go interplanetary, but you can easily go to Duna using chemical propulsion, especially with modded fuels like Hydrolox and methane. But unfortunately, our interplanetary exploration will have to wait until next episode. I have been Nebula, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this episode, and I'll see you all later.